Mind if we add these tables? I think it's going to be a smaller group tonight, and if we can break up like the PA monopoly here and we need to be able to spread that out. Why should one table get old? Come on now. They doing all the yeah, anytime. What do you want to do? Join us. Oh.
Jeff, Epic.
So how's everybody doing?
Good.
Yeah, I'm gonna breathe out. Yeah. You know what? The holidays, are you guys get holiday break or something, right?
Yes.
Okay. Holidays are coming up, right? That's good. That's good. So I'm gonna start this session, and then Marcy Contreras, who is PA faculty, is going to like tag me out. So this month's session is on human rights, and we're really going to go through a couple. I'm going to skip this for now, but we're going to go through just kind of the concept of human rights, not necessarily like these are a list of them, but just start with like theoretical, what is the concept, and then look at the history of human rights, especially over the last 50 years and how it's evolved and how and why it is what it is today. It's an intensely historical subject, and it's also something that is reactionary to current events. So we're going to look at the UN Declaration of Human Rights and kind of put that into larger context. We have 30 articles of the UN Declaration of Human Rights. They all fit on this nice, pretty page, but if you look at the text, it's like a million pages. It's very long. So this is a condensed version. Then we'll look at kind of do a human rights scenario and discuss one of the key, I think, philosophical issues, which is if human rights exist, are they universal? Does every human being have them? And if they have them, who grants them? Who gives them? And if you have them and you have a grantor, then who protects them? Those are kind of the issues that get a little hairy. Usually people are on board with the general concept, but then it gets really complicated with the actual details of what that looks like on the ground. And then we're going to look at a contemporary issue kind of through the lens of human rights. So I wanted you guys, and we can do this as a large group since it's so small, and if we could have you guys join one of these groups and make these groups even bigger. What does the concept of human rights mean to you? Like when you think of that as a construct, what does it mean to you as an individual in your life or in your culture, society, whatever?
Like now or like in our groups?
No, you could just.
Oh, okay.
Well, we're not going to do the small groups. We'll just do a large group. What do you think?
The rights you should get just because you're the species as a human being, child, adult, no matter race or religion, as part of the species, you should have certain rights.
Okay, so just part and parcel of being human,
yeah.
Whether you're a child or an adult, and there are certain things that ought not be done to you and other rights that you should have because you're part of this. Okay. Anybody else? And we keep making eye contact. It's kind of hard to explain. Like there's just like an understanding. Like that's what they understand.
Just like the basic. I just want to say right, but just like what everyone deserves.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like the underlying basis.
Yeah. And I think it's hard to describe without using rights
Yeah.
because it's one of those things where you know it immediately if it's being violated.
Yeah.
But if people are just exercising their human rights, it doesn't necessarily have like bells and whistles and doves and flowers and unicorns. Like it's just that when you're not being treated the way that you should, or when people are not being treated as they should. So keep that in mind, because it has been a way to really capture the idea of how people should and shouldn't be treated. And a lot of times it is in the violation of those rights that you say, okay, something's not right here. So when we think of what are human rights, you guys mentioned a lot of this already, which they're rights that are inherent to all human beings, no matter your sex, your gender, your nationality, your language, anything like that. It's not dependent on any other status that you would have. And that we're all equally entitled to these rights without discrimination, and that they're interrelated. You kind of need one in order to exercise another. For example, if we say that everybody has a right to civic participation, you can't really exercise your right to be able to be a part of civic engagement if you don't have education, right? Because that needs to be informed. So a lot of these rights are not piecemeal, they actually work together. So some of the other concepts that have been used, even historically over time, are the idea of human decency, of dignity, that people ought to be treated a certain way. And pretty much every single ancient civilization to religious texts, if you look at the Bible, the Quran, there are examples of people ought to be treated a certain way. There should be a certain standard by which we treat each other. So even though the language of human rights isn't captured in the way that we see them now, if you're like an archaeologist kind of digging through what human rights used to look like, you can find kind of seeds of that, of just like things like fairness in really ancient civilizations, in the way that societies organize themselves, and also in a lot of religious texts as well. And there's also this idea that there's the worth, every individual has value or worth no matter what, and that there may be many things that we want in life. I may want a flat screen TV. I don't have a right to it, right? That seems kind of silly. That there's a huge difference between a right and a want. And usually rights stem very closely from things that are kind of basic human needs. So we think of food, water, shelter, those kinds of things. But then other things that underlie even that, which is the right to have a culture, the right to belong to a nation, those kinds of things as well. Can you think of any time, group, movement in history that has used the language of human rights? U.S. history, world history. Apartheid, right. Hey, is that candy? Maybe.
It's only for, our little thing that, we win something.
Okay, later. Okay. I appreciate you brought something. As a prize, once I had a golden bar that I wanted to give as a prize. And you're way smarter than I am. Okay. So you mentioned apartheid. So what were the rights there?
Yeah. Well, it's been a while since I recall it, but I just remember South African. They were basically segregating them into a certain kind of all of that black people have I guess in America, all the South African black people were segregated into a certain colony. So they didn't have, I guess, the human right to live wherever they wanted.
Yeah. They actually had, so apartheid was also not only a social separation, a physical separation, but also an economic separation as well. So there were certain jobs that certain people couldn't have, there were certain places people couldn't live. There were restrictions on where you could even walk and travel. So you can see how that is like one of like the prototypical examples of rights being stripped away from people. And the idea of human rights and language of human rights has been used over time for apartheid, for civil rights movement in the U.S., for the women's rights movement in the U.S., and has been captured by many other countries as well to really create political change, and in some ways pushing for cultural change, for revolution within the government or the society as well. And so in this way, these rights can be very aspirational. So when you read the list, there's some things that you're like, oh, I wish I had that. They're not meant to be a checklist of, oh, right to education, got it, check, next. They're all in various stages of development and acquisition. So there's some countries that are further along on, right to be able to vote, and others that are further along on right to health care, which we don't really have in this country. So it's not a matter of you either have it or you don't. A lot of times there's kind of a spectrum, and countries, societies fall in different places, but there is this like aspirational quality to them, and this idea that maybe they're stepstones towards being able to fulfill that right in a greater capacity. And again, they've been transformative in many of the big issues, and you'll see even in the political landscape here in the U.S. and abroad that these rights are still in the forefront. It's huge when they had the UN meetings on climate change. Like a lot of folks are talking about, okay, the economic rights of developing countries being able to grow their industry versus like the rights that the rest of us also have of being able to breathe clean air and of protecting future generations. So sometimes these political issues end up becoming really rights issues that sometimes conflict with each other. Okay, so this is a short little video. Why can't I ever cut and paste on this? Okay. So, control? No. Can you guys tell I'm a Mac person? Like, how do you do this? What do you click?
Oh, you got it.
Okay. So this is a video that looks at a little bit of the history of human rights and how it's evolved over time.
Human rights is, geez, that's a good question. Human rights. Wow. I don't even know how to give that a definition.
I would probably have to do a little bit of homework or something. Any right that I think just as a normal, human,
The rights that humans have.
that's a very large debate.
Tú le puedes preguntar a 20 personas y te van a dar 20 diferentes opiniones.
Some kids say. We just take it for granted that they're there, but we don't even consider what they are.
Human rights are the rights you have simply because you're human. It's how you instinctively expect and deserve to be treated as a person, like the right to live freely, to speak your mind, and to be treated as an equal. There are many kinds of rights. Most apply to a certain group. But human rights are the only ones that apply to absolutely everyone, everywhere. That means kids, old people, poor people, basketball players, garbage men, rappers, teachers, Africans, Indians, Albanians, Christians, Muslims, Kabbalists, atheists, your mom, your dad, your next door neighbor, and you all have the exact same human rights. In other words, they're universal. But the question remains, what are they?
Name the human rights?
What the human rights are?
The right to live, equality between all people.
Right to religion, the right to...
Is there supposed to be a list somewhere I should be aware of?
According to the United Nations, there are a total of 30 human rights, which are usually lumped together and called simply human rights. They're all listed out in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is the world's most widely accepted document on the subject. But it was a long time in coming. At first, there were no human rights. If you were in with the right crowd, you were safe. If you weren't, well, you weren't. But then a guy named Cyrus the Great decided to change all that. After conquering Babylon, he did something completely revolutionary. He announced that all slaves were free to go. He also said people had the freedom to choose their religion, no matter what crowd they were a part of. He documented his words on a clay tablet known as the Cyrus Cylinder. And just like that, human rights were born. The idea spread quickly to Greece, to India, and eventually to Rome. They noticed that people naturally followed certain laws, even if they weren't told to. They called this natural law, but it kept getting trampled on by those in power. Not until 1,000 years later in England did they finally get a king to agree that no one can overrule the rights of people, not even a king. People's rights were finally recognized, and they were now safe from those in power. Kind of. It still took a bunch of British rebels declaring their independence before the king got the point that all men are created equal. Which isn't to say he liked the idea, but he couldn't stop them. And America was born. The French immediately followed with their own revolution for their own rights. Their list was even longer, and they insisted that these rights weren't just made up. They were natural. The Roman concept of natural law had become natural rights. Unfortunately, not everyone was so thrilled. In France, a general named Napoleon decided to overthrow the new French democracy and crown himself emperor of the world. He almost succeeded. But the countries of Europe joined forces and defeated him. Human rights was again a hot topic. They drew up international agreements, broadly granting many rights across Europe. But only across Europe. The rest of the world somehow still didn't qualify. Instead, they got invaded, conquered, and consumed by Europe's massive empires. But then a young lawyer from India decided enough was enough. His name was Mahatma Gandhi, and in the face of violence, he insisted that all people of Earth had rights, not just in Europe. Eventually, even Europeans started to agree. But it wasn't going to be that easy. 2 world wars erupted. Hitler exterminated half the Jewish population of Earth in horrifying Nazi death camps. And all told, 90 million people died. Never had human rights been so terrifyingly close to extinction. And never had the world been more desperate for change. So the countries of Earth banded together and formed the United Nations. Their basic purpose was to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person. But what were human rights? Were they the proclamations of Cyrus, the natural laws of Rome, the declarations of France? Everyone seemed to have a slightly different idea of what human rights should be. But under the supervision of Eleanor Roosevelt, they finally agreed on a set of rights that applied to absolutely everyone. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The French concept of natural rights had finally become human rights. So, in summary, at first, only a few lucky people had any rights, until one of those guys decided, hey, other people should have some rights too, which was great, except not everyone agreed, and it only took a few thousand years of fighting and declarations and more fighting until everyone finally agreed that human rights should apply to everyone. And they all lived happily ever after. Except for one little problem. If people have the right to food and shelter, why are 16,000 children dying of starvation every day? 1 every 5 seconds. If people have freedom of speech, why are thousands in prison for speaking their minds? If people have the right to education, why are over 1 billion adults unable to read? If slavery has truly been abolished, why are 27 million people still enslaved today? More than twice as many as in 1800. The fact is, when it was signed, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights did not have the force of law. It was optional. And despite many more documents, conventions, treaties, and laws, it's still a little more than words on a page. So the question is, who will make those words a reality?
I have a dream today.
When Dr. King marched for racial equality, he was marching for rights that had been guaranteed by the United Nations for almost 2 decades. But still, he marched. When Nelson Mandela stood up for social justice in the 1990s, his country had already agreed to abolish such discrimination for almost 40 years. But still, he fought. Those who fight today against torture, poverty, and discrimination are not giants or superheroes. They're people. Kids, mothers, fathers, teachers, free-thinking individuals who refuse to be silent, who realize that human rights are not a history lesson. They're not words on a page. They're not speeches or commercials or PR campaigns. They are the choices we make every day as human beings. They are the responsibility we all share to respect each other, to help each other, and to protect those in need. As Eleanor Roosevelt said, where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places close to home. So close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Yet they are the world of the individual person, the neighborhood he lives in, the school or college he attends, the factory, farm, or office where he works. Such are the places where every man, woman, and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity, without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere.
So what you guys think of that video that we made? What, we couldn't have made that video?
Yeah.
What you guys think? You did a great job putting it together. Thanks so much. We worked really hard on it.
Yes, right.
To draw my back.
This is a quiet group, man. B was pretty rowdy. There's a lot of cards over there.
Pretty comprehensive. The video. There's little left to say, to be honest. Yeah. Maybe there was a little bit of apartheid and colonization, and there was a little bit of Gandhi. There was like.
MLK, like throwing everybody in.
Everybody in there.
Yeah. And Napoleon.
What do you guys think that this is kind of the story up until modern day? What do you think the story of human rights will be like to your children?
I think it's always going to be ongoing. As we've seen in history, there's always been some kind of conflict. I mean, there's so many people in the world, it's continually growing, and so I just don't think it's going to ever be solved, really, to anyone, because people have such high expectations. I just don't think it's ever going to be met. And definitely, like, probably just cyclical.
Well, there definitely is something to having historical memory, right? That happens in countries, it happens even in institutions, where when there's a big event, it's in the consciousness of that generation, and then that kind of dies away, and it's not so present in the consciousness of the new generation. So, maybe we are just kind of recycling the same issues and themes over and over again.
I don't know if I agree with that, because if you consider the last 2,000 years, say, you'd see that initially you had clans where everyone was in distinct groups, each with their own set of different understandings, and then you had nations, and now we have big nations, and now you have the European Union, which is a collection of nations. So the understanding, I think, is getting broader and broader and broader, and it's going to continue that way until we have like a more global government almost, where the human rights are recognized and actually integrated throughout the world, which we really don't have right now in places like Africa and India.
I think, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's so optimistic. I love that. Just the world would be a better place.
Yeah,
we could all just.
It's the utopian Star Trek
Yeah,
Next Generation universe.
There you go.
That we both love. But I know with Brexit, it was such a bad setback to that, but still we can hope that the African Union may get stronger, so.
Well, I know
there's
just.
hope.
I was going to say, just with women's rights, I've been very encouraged lately with all the courageous women that have come forward with, sexual harassment, sexual assault cases, and then, driving to work this morning and Matt Lauer's fired, I'm kind of encouraged by that there's just more and more women coming forward. So, and I don't know if that's, well, I don't want to get political. I was going to say I don't know if that's because it's a culture of our president. But yes. I know you don't want to get a lot about it.
The also is like great and everything, and it is very optimistic and utopian, but I mean you see it in the video too. They're talking about like we have more slaves than we did in the 1800s, right? And then even with current day culture now pushing towards, we were going global for like, what was it, like 200 years or something like that with the colonization and everything. Now they're going to push back and like, no, we need to go back to nations. We need to be able to take care of our own people before we can take care of the world. And so, like, with the whole like cyclical cycle, I see that argument, and I mean, it would be great to believe the utopian world and whatnot, but like you can see there's always going to be a dark side of something.
But
That's whether or not you acknowledge that.
so you were saying you took a pause and I was like, okay, she's
That's okay.
I can't tell. That's why I suck at PBL too. But anyway, everyone takes a breath and I'm like, oh, and then you're like, anyways, like the proportion of so you're saying we have more slaves,
I don't
now.
think that's factually correct at all.
I think it's because we have a bigger
population, right? Too.
We
So,
will get into that.
Well, it's interesting fact that you look at the numbers. Post-traffic event of the
Sure, I believe that, but I think you also have to consider it as a fraction of the total population of humans on the planet. We have 7 billion now, we had 1 billion in 1800, and you can't compare the same
So
number.
you're saying that even if
So
the actual numbers have increased, so has the overall population. So you're saying fractionally.
Look at percentages.
No, but what I'm saying is that even though the absolute number of trafficked people may have increased, as a species, our
It's a lower proportion.
lower proportion of trafficked people. So actually, we're improving.
So we're going to get into that a little bit later. Actually, that is Mercy's specialty, and we will talk about trafficking later. Anybody else have?
Well, anti-human trafficking is my specialty, not the human trafficking part.
Any other comments to that?
I would just say that I mean, I think I see it in somewhere of an in-between where I think we should always aspire to reach the utopia, even though realistically it might never actually happen, and there will always be bad things going on, and there will always be things that you don't want to be happening, but I think it's just, you take that realism and you use it to get as close as possible, and one can just hope that we continue progress overall. I mean, it is the most peaceful time in history that we've ever known currently, and so there's some progress. And when you look at women's, here just in the U.S., right, women's rights of other minorities, we're slowly getting there. We're not there yet, but we've done a lot of progress in 100 years, and sometimes it's really easy to forget. Just look back in the 70s, and half of the stuff was not okay, and it was not that long ago. And so I think it's easy to forget all the little progress we've done because we're not perfect, but that progress is important. I think it's just a focus of we keep trudging along for that utopia, even if it might never actually happen.
And I think something to think about, just kind of with yourself throughout this year, is there's kind of the reality, and then there's the utopia. And you're kind of stuck here, able to see that the reality doesn't match the utopia. Knowing the utopia may or may not happen, but you want to try to move things in that direction. What is your responsibility? What is your individual responsibility? How can you become an agent of change within your own life, community, whatever, to try to inch in whatever way that you can and push towards that utopia?
I agree with what both of you have said. She said that the cycle may be a reality, but it's just important to be aware of the cycle and to aspire to the utopia, and that's what you said as well. And that's what we have to do, just look at the utopia and keep working for it. The argument is why would we go to the moon if we have so much poverty on Earth, right? Because we have a right to aspire, like you said. So if aspiration is one of the human rights, then we should aspire to it.
I like it. Good note.
I'm going to pass the baton to Marcy here.
And I do remember, by the way.
You do.
I do, yeah. All right.
Okay, bye.
Bye, thank you. All right. Okay, it's frozen. Wait, don't leave. What's happening? I'm looking for the mouse. Why won't it go? Oh, crap. Okay, we have a frozen.
I need a theme
How do I
song.
get out? Help me, IT guru.
I'm actually not IT, but we'll figure it out. I think. Everyone look away. Don't look what I do.
Look away. I'm not IT savvy at all. It's frozen. Oh, no, look at it. Oh.
Wait, we're watching it again?
No.
Go back to the.
Wait, I don't want to watch it again.
No.
Oh, that's what you were. I thought it
I
was
was
a
trying
new
to get out of the system.
For anyone who didn't get it the first time, we're gonna go through it one more
I
time.
just wanted to get to the next slide.
Okay, let's see. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Thank you so much for your magic touch. Okay. So I'm going to pass this out. Well, first I'm going to pass out. This is a list of the UN's Declaration of Human Rights. I'll let you look at this first. Where's all your peeps, man? You got a lot of cards over there. And
There's one tomorrow.
I think don't be studying for my test.
That means that's even awesome.
I'll read that.
So
Yeah.
these students that came here,
I think we could
And maybe they should get an extra
point.
point. I don't know. I'm feeling it. You know how I roll. So take a look at that real quick, and now I'm going to pass out this little, kind of like a bingo. Okay. What you're going to do is designate. You're each going to have a copy, but designate one person to fill in all the squares. Try to get as many as you can. I'll give you a few minutes. So kind of like a bingo blackout.
Do you have a pen out?
Oh, okay. There you go. And it doesn't have to match to what's on the Declaration of Rights. Let's just kind of give you a guide. But it could be like, I think one of them's like, you need an extra. Yeah. One of them's like, maybe you read a book that's about the rights or whatever. So, do y'all have enough over here? Yes. There's another person over here. Is there one person? Probably, or maybe we can split some of you guys. Okay, so take a few minutes, fill in the squares. So it doesn't have to match. This is just a guide for you to keep the Declaration of Human Rights, but the actual squares handout. So you're going to think of, say, the first one on the left at the top, a civil or political human right. Just think of something, some political human right. And then one of them says like a book about rights. So you're just going to think of things and write them in. Have one person kind of be the hub of all of your answers, but you can all have a copy. Got that? Okay.
I can write it.
Article.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is it? For my research.
Flag 13.
Let's look at document.
13. 13.
Write that down. Right? Whoever is our.
I thought that was a series of other teams.
No, that was 13 reasons. There you go.
Oh.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, I thought it was the middle.
So
The
that
one, that one.
Why are
It's called the Declaration.
Film video. One of them is film video.
What about
Who's writing? Who's going to be our name writer?
what about that line? Least donation.
I'm really bad right now.
Political.
Document that pertains.
Yeah.
The document that pertains to rights. You and the Declaration. Or you could write like the Bill of Rights of the Constitution.
Declaration.
No, that's not the Bill of Rights.
That is
Yeah,
not right.
Yeah, so it's all those things right.
Or the line.
Prove that your country has yeah, you guys are going randomly and I can't. Let's just go. Yes. Right to speech or control, whatever. Economic, social, or cultural rights. Economic, yeah, so that works. So right to employment.
Oh, there you go. Right to fair trial. There you go.
Oh, right to equality.
That's what it is.
There's some examples which is
Who in your country that wants to deny rights to divorce? The majority?
No. Yeah, that's something.
Like, don't majority people want to deny the rights to divorce?
I think only just was like more.
Yeah.
Okay, they're all there.
White supremacists.
Just wait for it. Let's just read that. But I think this is the country where people are denied their rights. Just put here.
No, I think it's
Organization which fights for human rights. Film or radio in that country where human rights are violated.
You got bingo. Rights handout.
Human rights.
Well, it's just denied of life. Like denied of denied to be like they have to safely move on. I'll give you rights to say bye. Every country for both.
What was the?
Human rights is also violated in the name of national.
Oh, right, rights of enemy victims.
That works.
How about our case for
Maybe we should change one of them.
We should expand our.
Yeah, let's change one of those three at least.
It's around the country, right?
Oh,
It's like.
Okay, when you're back, brother, I gotta read that.
I know. Like just now.
No, I'm just kidding. No,
I never read
No,
I read my senior course.
So I kind of feel like the same thing.
But now they want now.
It's like-
So we'll put
It's
brand new.
It's really
No.
big.
They just started.
Oh, that's a big. That's been going on
Human rights
for
being
years. That was happening when I lived there.
I know.
I think the king is sensitive.
Raise a left breast.
All the people are totally fine. They all sign that.
So human rights are violated in the name of national security. Human rights are violated in the name of national security.
I thought you were actually kidding.
You get accused of being
No, you're not
terrorist, you get arrested for no reason.
There's also like right, a right to asylum violation.
So what right is being violated?
Right, there's document from the Conviction of Human Rights, number 14, whatever. Literally happening right now. That's a human right that's often violated in the name of national security, not in a different country.
Oh, wow.
That's
We're
more
all like 3 4. Pretty good.
Country or human rights situation has improved recently.
Okay, they only have like 3 or 4 left. Y'all better pick it up a notch.
But do they have specific examples?
They probably do.
Oh, we got it.
Oh, they got examples.
Type of human rights that most
And for that group that gets the most, you win candy cane.
Prostitution. A book about rights. Rights sometimes are to women.
Well, no, that's not, that's only one.
Yeah, we should take it. Is that right?
Is that universally cultural or is that necessarily?
But this, I mean, that's a.
It is, or depending where it is actually.
That's what it asks.
Or we should for our country too.
I feel like education.
Education should be for all children, yes, I agree.
Oh, yeah.
Country where people are denied is because of their religion. I'm trying to like really.
Yeah, you're like trying to rip through it. But it's not touching the whole USA.
And it's
We're
really
doing
not
like
so
we're just
long.
obviously. Who are you talking about? We've been
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I.
So, this is how we say it. Last year, it would have been all better.
Yeah, that's what I'm not.
You just wait, baby.
Circa.
Yeah, yes.
Women 2 years ago.
I see.
Whereas birth control is like, it's not.
You're the only one who can't reproduce.
Yeah, that's why it's like, it's not regular.
People pay.
That's here.
Tell me a book about rights. Book about rights.
There's so many.
Beyond
There's so many, but I can't.
Could make it up. The life of Nelson Mandela, that's probably.
Of the country people are denied rights. No,
That's the one over stuff. Usually that's one that's like pretty quick. Yeah, people tend to disagree about what
people
people
trying
try
to
to
establish their own nation.
I mean, in some ways, in some areas, yes, but then, yeah, in some ways not. Definitely.
Human rights. Water.
Okay, well, let's call it. I think they only had 2 more to go. You guys had probably
Also two.
just crashing away. All right, guys, you win. Yay! There you go. And of course, you get some too. There you go.
Recently.
So what did you guys come up with? Say for, what about the type of human right violation that most disturbs you? What did you guys come up with? Genocide. Genocide? Yeah, for sure.
Child prostitution.
Prostitution?
Child
Prostitution, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, those are both very, very disturbing. What about, did you guys end up getting the country where human rights situation has improved recently? What did you come up with? Australia? Okay, tell me about that.
Well, they just approved, I don't know the details of it, but I know they just voted on gay marriage to pass it. I don't know, I know it's not the law yet, but
It passed.
it passed now.
It passed.
So that's what we're thinking. Get married?
Yes.
Oh.
Very cool. What did you guys come up with for that one?
Saudi Arabia.
The right to permit to drive.
Right.
Yeah.
That should happen,
That's right.
Thousands of years late.
Man.
They can find it in a while.
It's the only country in the world where women are not allowed to vote.
What about, okay, what did you guys get for human rights? Oh, we didn't get it. Human rights being achieved around the world. Didn't get it. I didn't get it. Did you guys get it? Human right being achieved around the world is education. Are you sure?
There's just so many.
Globally, education is being achieved.
Right.
You can argue against it.
Okay, actually, it's kind of a trick question because there's not really one. There's not really a human right. So yeah. But it's always fun to hear what you guys come up with. What's a right that all children should have besides the right to Wi-Fi and whatever else you're doing? Education. Every child should have the right to education. Absolutely. Very good. Okay, we're going to play a little game here. You guys are probably familiar with Fernando. Is he familiar? I know, he's back. Little Fernando. Okay, so the famine has passed and Fernando is growing up. He's just started going to school. Yay. His uncle Juan Verdad is helping to support his family, including paying for school fees. His mother and father are grateful to Juan for his financial help. And Juan is the editor of Children Texaco's largest newspaper, The Important Times. He is interested in the impact of domestic and foreign investment on the well-being of children Texicans. Juan discovers that the wealthy foreign and children Texican investors are running a drug cartel through the province of Texaco, which is Fernando's home. Texicans are being threatened to get off the land and in some cases tortured or murdered. So Juan publishes a story in his newspaper of these atrocities. He hinted that the investors and government might be responsible. The day after publication, Juan and two of his assistant editors disappear. Dun, dun, dun. The government has denied knowledge of his whereabouts. Juan's family and friends decide to go look for him. Okay, so now you're going to get this little character profile sheet, and you have to decide on who you want to be. What character do you want to be, and really get into character? Be one with your character. Be one. All right. So I'll give you just a second to figure that out. And you can have more than, if you want to be nun or priest, you can have more than one nun or priest at your table. It doesn't matter. You don't have to have one of each. You can just decide who you want to be. Uh-oh. Okay. So everyone got it? Who they want to be? You're feeling your character, maybe? Okay. So you're going to be thinking in terms of your character. What would your character do? Not what you, UTMB student, would do, but you as that character. What would they actually do? Okay. So your objective is to find Juan Verdad. Remember, you're going to take chances, and I'm going to read some of the consequences, or read each choice that you'll have. You'll make a choice, and then we'll figure out what those consequences are. Some people might disappear to be never seen again. Some people may go to jail. We don't know, okay? So remember, you have to act as your character and then listen. It's very complex, okay? So we'll talk you through it. If you choose nothing as your choice, that means that you just sit tight, you do nothing, you're quiet, but you can't choose the nothing more than twice in a row, okay? So if you choose nothing once, then the next time around, you have to actually make a bigger choice. It's frozen again.
Oh, did you get the down arrow?
Yes. Oh.
Troubleshooting?
I do die.
How is this like so difficult? I don't. Okay,
Oh,
wait
you
a
got
minute. Yay. Okay.
I'm gonna stand up. Count the
Yay.
floor.
You threatened to fix it. Okay. So Verdad's family and friends decide to go look for him. First they go to the office of important times. Y'all ready? Okay, they learned from the coworkers that he kept a special file revealing documents about the children's Mexican massacres. Upon opening the files, you discover the papers are gone. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, now what should you do next? Will your character, A, write a letter to the children's Mexican government pleading for information about Juan? B, write a news story letter to the editor or give an interview to a news agency accusing the government of causing the disappearance? Or C, do nothing and keep quiet. What would your character do in this situation?
Can you go back actually?
Yes. Okay. So, you go into the office, papers are gone. What are we going to do? You're enraged. You're trying to look for Juan Verdad. And so now, you're going to write a letter, write a news story to the editor, and give an interview to a news agency accusing the government. Or C, do nothing and keep quiet. So getting into character, what would you do? How many would you A? You're going to write a letter to the children's Mexican government pleading for information. Okay.
Do we have to reveal what our characters are?
You don't have to, no.
Okay.
Okay, so A's, okay. Where are the B's? Who would write a news story and accuse the government? B, you're going to boldly accuse the government. Okay, we got a couple of B's. And then how many would do nothing and keep quiet? Only a couple. Hey, you can't vote twice. It's like, okay. Here's your consequences of choices here, okay? A, if you chose A, you're disappearing. So you got to get up and you actually have to disappear over there in that side of the room. Bye-bye. We don't know where you're going. We may never see you again. Isn't it sad? Okay. If it's B, you're taken to jail, interrogated and tortured.
Let's go to jail.
Except international journalists.
Play them.
Wait, what?
Yes. Except if you're an international journalist. If you're an international journalist. There was more B's than that. No one's going to jail? Y'all are both international journalists? Are you really? Or did you change mid-walk?
I don't know.
Oh, wait, I really am.
I know what I am. But
Okay.
it doesn't
Nobody's in jail. This is amazing. Okay. And then see, you guys are doing it. Okay, there's a crackdown on dissidents by police in your neighborhood. Okay. All right. Now, Verdad's family and friends decide to visit the director of public information. They ask if he knows anything about Verdad, but he only repeats the government's official position that they have no knowledge of his disappearance. So based on that, what would your character do? A, lead a demonstration in front of the director of public information's office. B, ask your local mayor for help. Or C, go home and do nothing. So think about that. Begin in one with your character. You're disappeared. You can't make a choice. Y'all are still gone forever. Well, maybe not forever, but for a little while. Just these folks have to make a choice. Okay, are we good? Okay, let's find out what happens to you. A. Oh, wait, we didn't even vote. Oh, wait, you didn't see that. How many would choose A? Now you know. Now you know you can disappear. You didn't see that. Take it away. Unsee it. A's, you know you're going to vote A. Own it.
I would.
You would. Okay. You're going to lead demonstration in front of the director's office. Okay, B's, ask your local mayor for help. Lots of B's, okay? And then if you did nothing, you can't do nothing now. So if you did nothing before, you actually have to have a vote of A or B. Did we have that happen? Who would do C, do nothing? So if you did nothing,
There's nothing on under B.
you're doing B. Okay. So let's find out what happens. All right. A, disappear. So those that chose A, you're disappearing. You already know you were disappearing. B, you're picked up by the police, beaten, and interrogated. So now you're going to go to jail. You're going to jail. Everyone's going to jail. You're interrogated and being tortured. And then C, nothing happens to you.
Oh yeah.
And if you already were in jail, then half were released, but we didn't have anybody in jail. Okay. Everyone who remains gets together at an underground meeting. At the meeting, they voice their fears about Verdad's well-being. They resolve to find him. The government's assault against the children's Mexican people has stepped up. The meeting group contacts Amnesty International to put pressure on the government to release Verdad. Now, what should you do next?
There's no one.
Nobody's there.
I know. So we'll let you actually, usually this is like people get out of jail and they're sitting amongst us. So let's just all come back. We'll all come back and then we'll just vote.
We got the hole. We got out.
Usually we have the first round of jailbirds back at the table. A, okay, now what would you do coming back? You've been released from jail, you're found from being disappeared. Would you A, write a story letter to the editor to provide information to a news agency denouncing the government? B, organize a boycott of multinational corporations thought to be involved in the drug trade? Or C, go home and do nothing? So how many A's do we have?
Can the first one be anonymous?
It
says provide information to a news agency.
I would say so. If your character would be anonymous, like maybe you don't want
And then
to.
on the next slide, like A, like you got to
So how many A's do we have? Maybe you're anonymous. If you're anonymous. B, how many B's? Organize a boycott. Okay, that's what your character would do. And then C, go home and do nothing. You guys, there's too many go homes.
We've just come back from being disappeared.
You just got out of jail. You just were found. That's true. All right, A, picked up by police and go to jail. I know. B, you disappear. You guys can stay put. And then C, you go home to find your dog has been murdered. This is kind of drastic, I know. With a note that says, you will be next to get involved. I know, we're more horrified by a dog getting murdered than an actual person, right? But this is just really an exercise. So Amnesty International letters poured into the office of the children's Mexican president. Verdad's friends and family are encouraged by the international pressure, but the government still denies any knowledge or responsibility. And then here he is, released, finally. So really this is just an exercise to like make you realize that things like this are happening in the world today. I mean, people don't have, freedom of speech. They don't have this ability. They're picked up for just speaking their minds and things like that. So that happens really every day at some point in the world. So tell me, take a few minutes, look on that UN Declaration of Rights. Tell me how many, in this whole scenario that we just uncovered, how many human rights do you think were violated? Or which ones do you think were violated? So take a couple minutes.
Violated when? Like ever?
No, during that scenario, through all that scenario, when? Which ones? All of them at some point, yeah. No, just during that scenario, which ones?
Torture?
Yeah.
We got the next.
The dog. We don't know a lot.
But or like, what is? Did they say that you're being tortured? Or is it just? Oh yeah, that's a fair point. Like if they went with the dog, you don't. Yeah.
Y'all are more enraged about the dog than one's disappearing.
So true.
Have you ever seen John Wick?
Oh yeah.
Don't kill people with dogs.
No, you do.
That was a good one. When Keanu Reeves better.
Oh, you dying?
What do you think?
What is 20? I don't even know how to drink.
Okay, so what did you guys come up with? Definitely right to education for poor little Fernando, right? That's like one.
Yeah.
What are all the others that you guys come up with? There's a ton, right?
Right to 5, 9 to 10, 11, 12.
Yep.
19, 20, 22.
16. Yeah. Opinion information, peaceful assembly and association, participate in government, free election. There's a lot, right? Any thoughts or comments about any of the scenario that we just went through? Thoughts, comments? No.
Money and power really dictates a lot of it, violations.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a fear. I think maybe even globally that money talks, especially in other countries. Did you guys talk about that a little bit about when you talked about foreign aid? Did you guys talk about that? Yeah. There's a thought that, we continue to give money to other countries and, what is that really doing? If you have more sustainability where you can go and teach them skills, go and, help them build crops and do things more sustainability, that actually might be more beneficial and help them build more infrastructure versus just throwing some money at them, because there's going to be corrupt governments. Okay, well, good. We'll move on. Okay, so the story continues. He's stripped of his post at the important times. The government takes over the newspaper. He's barred from working in journalism. He's unemployed now and emotionally scarred from his ordeal. He slips into depression and he becomes a recluse. He's no longer able to support Fernando and his family, and unfortunately, Fernando has to drop out of school. The drug cartels have started operating in Children, Texaco, and Fernando's mother nearly escapes a violent crime on her way home. Gangs have been frequenting Fernando's house, attempting to recruit him and threaten him when he says no. Fernando's parents are concerned about his safety. They spend all of their savings to pay a smuggler to take him and his sister to Arizona for a better life. This happens every day, right? So now what we're going to do is we don't have enough groups. Okay, so let's kind of break up. And so we'll have you three be somebody, you four, and then you three. So we have 4 groups now. Okay, and so let's let you 3 are going to be Fernando. You 4 are going to be the border guards. You 4 are going to be the U.S. politicians, and you 3 are the drug cartel.
Oh, yes.
So now what you're going to do with this particular character group, get into character drug cartel, politician. How does the situation make you feel from the perspective of your character as a group? You're going to talk about it for a couple minutes, and then what are the important human rights issues involved from that character's perspective? Okay, so talk amongst yourselves about that role assignment.
Perspective of us. So I would take off.
It's an argument that we ended up feeling right now because there's like security. before you were
Yeah. Yes. So how does the situation make you feel? And what are the important human rights issues?
Is he going to be? He was out of school. Obviously, 21st.
To like see whatever substance you want and smoke it or inject it.
He doesn't really bother. He doesn't want to rent to rest.
And the carrots are like,
Oh, the bar? Yeah. Okay. I was thinking, okay, my bad.
just like the right,
whatever.
So, and if you're really arguing for
it's like, oh yeah, these are pretty. And then you would publish it.
why purposefully
All those really.
drug cartel and alcohol?
You could argue with me that like
Like the consumer as well.
human rights should be, and then and I agree with that to the standpoint of like using that with
I gotta. We're not.
Yeah.
But also, like, sort of violation of too. Our job is to discriminate, but not like in a sense like it's just to execute
I'll give you like 3 more minutes.
right.
It's my character. What?
Somebody.
In 2 weeks.
And that, if we look at it from that perspective, the 9 minute education there, or is that like reaching too far? It makes sense. That's like why they're coming.
I know.
No, these are the ones that you were yeah.
You have the right to be in the ceremony. You have the right to be in the ceremony. You do have the right to be in the ceremony. 21 minutes. Oh, definitely. Yeah. That's sad.
I was like,
No, law school's I come from a family of lawyers. Anyway,
Really tough now to get
I think it depends what field you go to.
But I think just like percentage wise,
Yeah,
Or you could like.
it's less competitive to get into. It's also I think a lot of people tend to stick with like criminal, civil, divorce, like that kind of stuff, like the easier stuff. And also, obviously, a lot of lawyers like to congregate to, just bigger cities, because that's like where, some of the markets are. But I think it also depends on location. But you are right. A lot of lawyers, or at least a lot of them that are trying to work for firms, there's not a lot of hiring, but there is also a lot of lawyers aren't getting paid. Like back in the day, it was like, it's not like it's not the same. It really depends what kind of stuff you're doing. If you're doing like personal injury or doing Texas hammer, obviously it takes them.
Let's given that.
Have you ever heard about I'll tell you what. Come with me, meet me at Whataburger, and I will order double meat, double cheese on top of that 18-wheeler that hits. You know what I mean? It's
Or
like,
do you also
I don't know.
do you speak for arbitrary? Do you speak for like what maybe I'm trying to work out even like 2 steps ahead and it's like you go whatever.
So you're a utopian politician who actually cares about
I wonder like what they were. Wait,
That's
is that, like,
not
through
good enough
firms?
for me.
Is that through firms, like right?
No, that's just
like employed like through. Are they like? I don't know. Are they measuring that through? You know, there are a lot of people actually use like lobby rights as like so I understand.
But they're just saying for employment.
And this is just a long term.
And that's what you make us use this for.
oh yeah. I know this is weird, but also like in order to make sure that insurance
And that's
Yeah, it's
because I mean we don't
but then you also have other people.
Okay. What did you guys come up with? So Fernando, how do you feel? Oh wait, we're missing a Fernando. What do you guys? How do you feel?
well we thought he'd definitely be first and foremost really afraid. Number one for being away from his family and kind of not understand why he was being taken from them. And probably not wanting to go. I mean he would want to leave their family and their home to go to a foreign place.
And then he has a sister. I don't know. Do we know if she's younger or older? Let's assume she's
Younger.
Did it say she's younger? Yeah. So then you got this sister. I don't remember where it said the sister. Oh, they spent all their savings to pay someone to take him and his sister. So we don't really know, but we can assume that she's younger. So he's got to take care of his sister. Okay, and they're both scared, don't know what to do. What about border guard? What do you guys feel? What do you think? What do you feel? What are you thinking?
We were just saying like
Questions.
Just angry that like they came across the border and like were able to sneak across or like that's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe you're a border guard that's you're mad. That they're trying to get across. What if, or maybe one of you are a corrupt border guard, and you're taking money on the side from the drug cartel, and you're happy because now you got money from the drug cartel, and you're gonna help smuggle this kid across. That's just a wild idea that I had. But that's just a wild idea. Maybe you're not a corrupt border guard. That's too touchy. What are the human rights issues involved with Fernando and over here in the border guard people?
So there was a couple. Some of them like pertaining to like him or he or she, like the security guard himself, in terms of like executing their job, and then what would happen if they, or if they didn't freedom from discrimination. So like if the border patrol person didn't, I don't know my point. Someone tag it.
We were saying like personal security, keeping the personal security of the nation by protecting the border.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Yeah.
What about rights of Fernando?
So we had several. Basically, since he's leaving, he has the right to free movement in that country. right to an asylum in other countries from persecution. And assuming that Arizona is outside of his nation, his right to nationality, then we can change it.
Does he have right to asylum? I don't know.
I don't really know what that means.
It's like, is he in true danger if he goes back to his country?
Did he ever leave his country? His uncle got kidnapped and came back,
No, the
right?
previous one, Robert doesn't want the moment at least.
Yeah, he probably would. Yeah.
Because, like, I mean, he has two options. He can stay and we can hope that nothing happens again. But, I mean, assuming this is like the way everything goes with countries being invaded by drug cartels, that's not going to happen.
I'm just impressed that you can raise your hair and talk.
I know.
I'm really dumb right now. I can really think at the same time.
Eventually grading.
She's very thoughtful insight, and she's writing. Very impressive. Great. You guys are politicians. So what does the U.S. politician feel in this situation?
So we focus like two main ideas, like the U.S. politician, people who are like for and people who are against.
Are you going to build a wall?
We might build the biggest one. So yeah, tend to be that. Anyway, so like so for people against it, we put that the logic is we want to protect our own people. Like right now we know that Fernando's harmless. He's nothing to do with me.
Right.
But like as a politician, we don't really know that, and we know that Fernando will be back and other people might and all that. So from that point of view, we want to protect the rights and interests of our people first.
Right.
And I guess on the other spectrum, like who's for like this or not, we would be more for like instilling like programs like the papers and all that, or like commanded and like certain.
Very good. Very good. What human rights there with the politician?
13 and 15 for sure, right? We movement in the country and nationality.
Very good. All right. Drug cartel. What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
So we felt pretty justified in our actions because we felt we have a right to safety as well. So the climate of the things
Interesting
and whatnot.
perspective. Okay.
So we felt we have to do whatever is necessary to support ourselves as well as our families.
Hey, you have a right to earn a wage too, man.
Yep, exactly. And we considered, people who may have had prior felonies who can't get employment, so now they have to find other means apparently of getting money. So that unfortunately means selling drugs and other things like that. Of course, I was a disenfranchised person in the country, and maybe I felt like the government didn't care. So I'm living in a country where people just disappear, right, or go to jail. And so, or maybe I didn't have support, nobody's cared about me, so why should I care about other people? I need to make a living, I need to live. Nobody cared about me, so why do I need to care about anybody else?
I was an aspiring math student, and I was an aspiring math student who got a failure record because I smoked a joint, and now I can't get a job as a doctor.
So you might as well join the drug
I
cartel.
revenge on society by the drugs that are harmful to it,
And there's also the viewpoint of like the viewpoint of, well, we're not forcing anybody to take anything.
Right,
Everybody
right.
has the right to put whatever they want in their bodies
So-
and do what they want. All we do is we supply, and if you want it, you're taking it. We're not forcing you to. It's their choice.
Yeah,
I don't feel like y'all are real drug dealers. This is getting really scary.
we're providing a product to the marketplace. There's no
You are
human
shady.
rights that says other people can't do that.
What are your thoughts, guys, about this drug cartel? All right. Any thoughts? Any thoughts in total? Just in debriefing the scenario. This is something that happens all the time. All the time. And we're in Texas, right on the border of Mexico. This happens all the time. Do you know what they call these folks, these smugglers that smuggle people across? Coyotes. Yeah, and so what are the chances that Fernando and his sister might really hook up with the uncle in Arizona? Maybe pretty slim, Maybe they get sold to somebody else. Maybe they're going to be trafficked. You know, you don't know. And so that's what's really unfortunate and sad, that, you know, people in these other countries, and like Fernando's mother, are desperate. They're desperate for their child to have a better life, and so they, you know, put their trust and money into someone that can maybe get them to a better life. And so, unfortunately, it doesn't always work out that way. Any other thoughts that you guys may have on the scenario with Fernando? Okay. What do you think about just human rights in general? Do you think that human rights are universal? They should be universal? Why? Because if they should be and they're not, I mean, it's just they're always being violated, right? And I think that a lot of times the ones doing the violating is the government, interestingly, right? So, I mean, that's just something to walk away with. But I also think, do you think that maybe human rights are something that you are born with, that everyone just has the right, you know, you're born, this is what you have the right to, are these certain human rights, you're just born with it? Yeah? The government definitely has the responsibility to protect human rights.
But it's not always successful, or sometimes partially successful.
Right.
And a lot of times you always think of human rights like the gangs in Africa who are terrorizing the nations, or like militias. You think of these people as human rights, but there are many white label corporations right here in the United States that are also violating human rights. And you don't have to look far, like PG&E contaminated the groundwater in California with ammonia that poisoned thousands of people. Those people had a right to clean water.
Is that Aaron Brockovich?
Yeah, Aaron Brockovich.
Yeah, I mean, definitely.
Yeah, and you have companies like Nestle and Coca-Cola and PepsiCo going into developing nations and completely extracting the groundwater resources for their plants and ruining the environment. So it's a lot more like a diffuse subject where a lot of people are actually involved in violating human rights, not just militaries and militias and juntas.
And some of those big companies outsource their manufacturing to other countries, and they employ children or low wages and things like that too. I know, even though, I mean, I know Hershey's one of them. I should speak of companies, but I mean, it's delicious. Hershey chocolate's delicious, but there are one of them. Some other big companies that you just mentioned actually are guilty of the same. Do you think that, okay, so you're born, you're a baby, do you think that you're a child, do you think that you know what's right or wrong as far as human rights? I mean, because you have children in the militias, right? Children carrying these guns, killing people, but does the child know or think that it's wrong to kill a person? Or were they taught that it's okay to kill a person?
Lots of they're just taught. Yeah.
What's that?
It's more survival, you know, like these kids aren't given like the option. You know, it's either, you know, do this or kill you or bring your mother, like it's not really much of an option for these kids.
And maybe innately they know that it's wrong.
They might not. I mean, if you grow up in that kind of a world, you don't really know what's right and wrong. So, yeah.
Probably lose sight of it. I mean, we're all born with like the same cognitive capabilities, but along with them are in it, they probably just lose sight of what's right and wrong.
Yeah.
They never had a chance to think about it, right?
Yeah.
So, like it could just be, you know, you either do this or we're gonna kill you and your family. And that's not something that you can think about.
Not much an option.
No, so it's they might not even have opportunity or a chance to think about it, or it just might,
Yeah.
And if you're like young enough when you join the group, then that's probably not even a question that you have to face, because it's, as I said, survival.
Your brothers
You
are
just
doing
ride,
it.
everyone's doing it. It's not a matter of choice or being threatened into doing it. It's just the norm. You're like, you're human. You're actually an animal. You can just progress mentally into an adult, and that just doesn't happen.
Yeah. it's definitely a lot to think about, and it definitely weighs on you to think about some of these things. And I think, when we talk about, are some of these, human rights relative to culture? I mean, when we talk about just, right to live, that sort of thing. I mean, people in certain cultures think it's okay to kill somebody because of whatever reason, sister, wore a low-cut blouse or something. Well, we're going to kill her. Things like that. So do you think that different cultures have different moral codes, and should there be this objective truth and morality? Or is there no objective truth and morality? What do you think? So it's basically, thinking that, there's really no universal human rights, for that matter, because it would be relative to culture. So that's one thought. Do you agree with that?
I agree. I mean, it should be, that's the aspiration, that it should be. But, like, if you had 100 years ago headhunters in South America, and if an American came into the forest, their heads would be cut off and shrunk, then that was normal for them. And you had, like, even today in North Korea, if someone steps from North Korea, you just shoot them, they're dead. So, that's the situation.
It's really hard also because, like, different religions might have different, like, rulings on certain things, so it can get really tricky. Yeah, but there should definitely be a universal law that you don't kill other people.
Yeah, absolutely. But then what do you say to the government in Texas when you have death penalty? It's a whole nother can of worms there, Certainly, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, I feel like it's phrasing it in the sense it's like that it's like an absolute, like, if, it violates it because, like, one culture, one religion believes, like, it can't do all these universal rights that have been set up by the United Nations, therefore there are no universal human rights, and I would disagree with that. I would just say there's still, like, this template of universal rights, like 30, and it just narrowed it. It's kind of, like, subjective to the culture itself, depending on how they practice their way of life. You can't, like, I feel like it's a violation of human rights to force, I don't know, I know that sounds kind of bad, but to force human rights on...
Yeah,
because what if your thought is wrong?
Yeah,
you're forcing
that's not your human
Absolutely.
right. So it just, there's a template of human rights depending on the culture, but the practice just narrows down, or maybe they have more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, for example, everyone has a right to free speech, but in certain conservative families and religious families, the women are not allowed to speak in public. So that's just a modification that they have, and if you are going into their house and, hey, like, your woman needs to have her human rights, then you are, like, violating that person's religious rights.
Right.
So how do you balance the situation?
A violation for a violation.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. All good thoughts. Very good. So just some thoughts, like, to end with on this particular segment is, human rights is intimately connected to what it means to be human and how human beings are violated in big and small ways on a daily basis. So that's kind of what we're learning about with these scenarios that we played out, and connecting to ways in which humans are vulnerable and represent real threats, and realizing that, these things happen every day in all parts of the world. And as a way of articulating that people ought to be treated in a certain way and protected by certain things. Human rights are aspirational and represent an ideal of the kind of people in society that we want to live in. So these are all things that we can aspire to become, like Dr. Patel was saying in the beginning. There's definitely multiple types of vulnerable groups. I know that some of these are pretty graphic. One thing that Dr. Patel likes to interject is that, what if you did not have the right to urinate, like, in general, like it was somehow a rights violation to just not being able to urinate. So that's that. I mean, and I kind of argue that I think that sign is actually in New York, because I don't know, I've been to New York multiple times, and every time I think I've been to New York, I've seen a person urinating on the street. I've been to New York probably like 20, 30 times. Every time I'm in a cab, there's someone peeing on the side of the road. Because they just don't let you into bathrooms anyway. Anyone from New York? I'm sorry. it's just a thing. I don't know why. Every time I'm in a cab in New York, this is what I see. But just a wonderful quote by Nelson Mandela. For to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. And really, when the governments violate rights, what happens? Usually it's the people that are in an uprise. And many times it's at the state level. Or in a smaller, population. So, I mean, it's just something to think about and to take away with. I think I'm supposed to tell you to bring an article next month pertaining to public health and your profession. And then just switching gears here. So Dr. Patel alluded to one particular area of interest of mine is human trafficking. And so I actually used to practice at Baylor College of Medicine in the Med Center, and this was about probably 6-ish years ago. I was with one of my patients and just chatting, and she was telling me that she was going back to school to be a social worker to specifically target human trafficking because it was such a big problem in Houston. And I was like, huh? What are you talking about? And she goes on to tell me, and it just kind of an aha moment. And, went on about my life and, fast forward. It always resonated with me, and I was like, this is crazy, did some research here and there. And then fast forward, came to UTMB a few years ago, and when I did, asked around and said, is human trafficking educated, education and any of the curriculum? I asked School of Medicine, PA, nursing, residencies, nothing, nowhere. And they all kind of had the same response, like, huh, what are you talking about? Like, this is a problem here? And unfortunately, it really is. So I don't know why this is kind of embedded in my heart, and I've been really passionate about it. So in different ways, I kind of reach out in the community. So as a parent, I have twin daughters that are 15. So I'm an enraged parent in one part of me. I'm also, I think spiritually, it's a rights violation, and I have that whole part of me. And then as a medical provider and professional, I'm like, we've got to do something here, and we have a way to stop it at this point, and being able to recognize victims of human trafficking. So that's really been my goal going forward. I thought that getting into this, and I partner with many organizations around the Galveston and Houston area, and I thought, yes, I'm going to go in and I'm going to knock down doors and get kind of be on the front lines of this. And they're like, whoa, hang on here, just if you can just educate people, that's really what we need. And so that's really been my thing, is educating not just everyday folks. I mean, I'm driving my kids to school one day, and they know my whole spiel. They're like, oh, really? And when the Super Bowl, hey, you said it, when the Super Bowl was in town, they had big, Houston really did a really good job of putting signs in airports, news, broadcasts, people on the radio coming and talking and saying, this is a big problem. And so I remember talking to my daughters about it, and one of them said, well, a couple of years ago, they broke up a prostitution ring at my school. I'm like, what? I mean, and we're talking about Clear Creek ISD. I mean, this is not like, this is a pretty good, school district here. And I had to tell her, honey, they're not a prostitute if they're not of age. This is human trafficking, and at some point they were taken in to the life of human trafficking is what it really was about. And so when the video was talking about we have more slaves now than ever before, it's actually true, and it actually has to come down to human trafficking. So slavery is still a modern day thing. It's not a thing of the past, for sure. So what do you think about this question? At what age do most victims start to become trafficked? What do you think? 8? Yeah, 8 and 13. Any for CRD? 13. Going with 13? It's actually 13. And so I know the statistic. I don't know the why behind the statistic. I've looked everywhere and researched it. Why is it 13? I don't know. It's just, this adolescent age of puberty, and maybe that's a part of it. I, of course, lie awake at night and think about these things, so this is my idea that I've come up with. So daycares end at age 12. So you put your kid in daycare, babies in daycare up until age 12. Then you're out of daycare, right? So you don't go to daycare anymore. That's where it ends. And yet, you're not 16 and you can't drive. So between 12 and 15, you've got kind of this time where either you get a ride home, you ride the bus home, what are you going to do after school? Parents are still at work. You're kind of too old for a babysitter. You don't need a babysitter, You're going to just have your key and go home. And so it's really this age of really big influence after school, and get kids, particularly girls, where they're highly influenced, or maybe they go to the mall, or I'm just throwing out scenarios, walk home, picked up. But really the real truth of it is some people, when they think of trafficked victims, they think of kind of this global thing like, oh, well, that's, in Thailand, or it's not like right here in Texas or Houston or America. When you think of human trafficking, you're thinking like, oh, this is like, other countries. I think of like, not just me being naive in the very beginning of things, I thought of like Russian mail order brides. And I'm like obsessed everywhere I go. So we were like, we were at, a restaurant down the street on the seawall. And this lady had a Russian accent. I'm like, there's a Russian mail order bride. To my coworkers, like, you are crazy. And I'm obsessed, or getting nails done or a pedicure. I'm like asking them all kinds of questions, like trying to probe and see if they're a trafficked victim. I really I'm like really obsessed with it all. But this is just to give you some numbers of how large this really is. This is a multi-billion dollar industry, not just multi-million, okay, multi-billion. So they really think that someday, I'll skip that. Someday, human trafficking is going to surpass drug trafficking and arms dealing, which is number one right now as far as trafficking goes. But there's different types of human trafficking, but specifically kind of my passion is anti-human trafficking with sex trafficking. But there's a lot of different types. There's labor, there's domestic work, agriculture, health and beauty services is big, restaurants and food services. A lot of times immigrants and things like that, certainly. So it's not always just sex trafficking, but when we think of sex trafficking, those are partly sometimes in health and beauty services, hotel, motel based, commercial front brothels. So commercial front brothel would be like, like you're driving down the road and there's like this kind of weird spa.
Seedy motel.
Yeah, a seedy type place, a seedy motel or seedy kind of spa. And we know, girls or maybe guys, that's not really the place for you. That's not the place that you go to get a massage or nails and why is that? Why do we think that? It's just like this weird place that's open at 10 o'clock at night with a blinkety-blink sign and you're like, that's weird. What's up there? What's going on there? And something's up to no good. Why? Why can't we just really rally and get more people educated about that? It's really tough from a legal standpoint to shut these places down, and it doesn't really matter. You can shut these places down, and they will just come up a block somewhere else with, and actually a lot of them talk to each other and are related and help each other out. Like, oh, just pop up over here next to me. We'll name it something else, and that's usually how those things go. Residential brothels are also very common. I've seen a few in Houston. Street-based online ads venues. So there's something called Backpage that actually was shut down, and conveniently enough, a couple weeks before the Super Bowl, which I was like, yes. There was, I think, over 300 arrests during the Super Bowl specifically for human trafficking. And some of the students last year, they were able to raise over 250 lipsticks as a fundraiser to give to one of the organizations. So you think, lipsticks? What's up with that? But really, it's kind of this secret way of trying to reach out to these girls. Because if you try to give them business cards with your contact information on them, and then the trafficker finds that on their person, they're going to get in a lot of trouble. probably beaten and get in a lot of big trouble. But if they find the lipstick, oh, that's just my lipstick, it's kind of bettering their appearance for clients. So they actually don't mind that as much. So what they do is they raise lipsticks, they give it to this organization that they gave to Elijah Rising, and Elijah Rising put a little SKU number sticker on the lipstick. But it does, those tiny numbers usually don't mean squat to us, right? But those tiny little numbers was a 1-800 number. So they strategically placed this on all of the lipsticks and then passed them out to the girls that they saw amongst like Super Bowl. So
Did anyone fall?
that I don't know. So that I don't know. And it would be hard to track. I mean, you could get a phone call, but you don't know if it was specifically tied back to that particular intervention. So what do you think of this question? Which city has the highest number of trafficking victims in the nation? Houston, are you sure?
Number 2.
It's either Houston or
Houston. I kind of think
Oh,
You gotta think Miami.
I don't know.
It's actually Houston. I know we're proud of a lot of things in the Astros, but we're not proud of this. It's kind of controversial. How do we know that this is really Houston? Well, they think that it's because we have the highest number of phone calls to the Harris County District. It's called something like the National Human Trafficking Resource Center Hotline. So the number of calls that come in specifically for Harris County is like more than anywhere else in the country. And so they think based on that we must be the number 1 city for human trafficking. But you can see the red there, that's all the hot spots. And also another reason why they believe that Houston might be number 1 is because, well, we have 2 international airports. We have the Port of Houston. We have Galveston. We have the Mexico border. We have I-10, Interstate 10. You can quickly just jump on I-10, go east, and you're out of state in just a few hours. So you see a lot of truckers moving, and what cargo they have, you don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing.
Yeah, I worked in a company where one of the guys who was in charge, he worked with like the government to work with Houston on trying to find like sex trafficking.
Ooh.
And he said that was a big thing where they would actually go out to like empty places around Texas where they have like truck stops and stuff, and that's where they focused on because that was where so much of it happened.
Yes.
Yeah. And Houston was where like everybody kind of comes in and then it spreads out. So like floods in Houston and
It's a dumping ground.
Yeah.
And one kind of thing that I found in my research was that there's 93 different languages and spoken dialects in Houston and surrounding areas. So you think about 93 different dialects and languages, that means you could easily just blend in, right? And I'm sure that probably some of these other cities like DC, New York, Miami are probably not far behind us based on those types of things too. Just being able to easily blend in.
Even zoning as well. Like Houston has zoning laws. You have a lot of these shacks in the middle of the city, a lot of quiet spots, a lot of rundown buildings that haven't been repaired in a while.
Mansion, then a shack, or drug, house.
So it's easier to hide what you're doing in Houston rather than like say New York, where everyone is so densely packed that it's hard to make things go unnoticed.
Yeah, maybe that's possibly true. So risk factors, certainly there's a lot, and I have them divided out by individual risk factors: family, community, societal. A lot of times people think that, maybe a lot of these girls are brought in across the border. But actually, the majority of them are American citizens. The majority of these trafficked girls are our children right here in America. And so a lot of them can be runaways. They can have maybe a dysfunctional family background, maybe LGBT status, gang membership, limited education, orphan, homeless. There's a lot of different scenarios. But really there are American citizen young girls. Another thing that's a disturbing thought is the young girls, especially the young, pretty girls, quote unquote, those are the ones that you put up in the commercial front brothels. Those are the ones, if they get in trouble with anything, the traffickers get really upset. You don't want to, hit them in the face, so they're going to be beaten on their legs, arms, and back, and not the face. This is the commodity So don't mess that up. They'll get really pissed if you mess up their face. So a lot of times if you see them in the clinic, they'll have really bad maybe fractures or bruises, and so they're going to have a lot of back pain and a lot of issues there. Also, a lot of things will go unnoticed or unwarranted. They'll have maybe, botched abortions, lots of UTIs, STDs or STIs, I should say, that go untreated. So then that's going to add to a lot of pelvic inflammatory disease and other things that can come across. So those are some of the things that you want to look for in the clinic. And then, of course, there's other societal risk factors as well. Lack of awareness is certainly a huge one. It took us just up until last year or the year before to convince Galveston Police Department that it was actually a problem in Galveston. It was amazing. So really education is huge. Sorry, this is another disturbing thought, but you can sell drugs that one time. You can sell a gun that one time, but you can really sell the human body over and over and over. And sometimes the minimum is 30 times a day. That's the life. And so that's really a disturbing thought. Some of these girls that are really young, like I said, they're in the commercial front brothels and some of those, the better kept places. The life expectancy of these girls is about 6 to 7 years. And life expectancy in thought of a couple of different ways. One is, in general, maybe they're going to die of drug overdose or some other means, but also their life expectancy as the commodity, as a moneymaker. So kind of by the time you're 20, 21, no one wants you anymore because you're getting older, you're kind of older, used up. Now we're going to go down, we're going to get some more girls that are young and 12 and 13 and that kind of thing. So once you kind of get older, your life expectancy in the life is going to move on. But guess what? You're already addicted to drugs. So those are usually the streetwalkers. So the ones that actually probably are truly prostitutes because they don't know any different. They've lost their family. They've lost any kind of connection. They don't even identify that they are victims, really, because they're like, man, I'm just trying to live. And they never identify as a victim. And even the young girls that get picked up still don't identify as a victim. And so it's not our job, unfortunately, we really feel like it should be, is to help these girls identify as a victim. Like when we come across them maybe in the clinic, like, girl, he is not your man, he is not your friend, and trying to get them to kind of like shake some sense into them. But guess what? They think that that's like kind of their boyfriend. They call him daddy, and that's their person. He takes care of me. He loves me. No one's ever maybe told them that they've been loved before and that type of thing. So usually they are very easy and prone to go right back to where they are. And that's actually what a lot of the organizations do to pull them out of the life. So some of these ranches and retreats that they have for victims, once they're rescued, they put them out in the middle of nowhere. So that way they can't just kind of get out or be picked up and go right back into the life. So just as a trafficker would pick them up and take them far away from all their support system and people that they know, we do the same thing when we rescue them, take them away from that life of the traffickers in the big city and put them out in the middle of nowhere, kind of in a ranch type situation. And it's really, really psychologically tough because, you're going to take away their phone, take away a lot of their independence and things like that. So it's almost like the same scenario. I mean, I kind of argue that we have to do a better job, I think, as providers in psychiatry to help in these ways. And it takes, years of rehabilitation in many cases. But a lot of these retreats that they have help them get their GED, help them get them back on their feet, and that type of thing. And so it does kind of take a village. It takes a lot of different resources and a lot of different organizations. What I love about Houston and the surrounding areas is it's not like everyone's trying to step over each other and do the same thing. So you have some organizations that target young girls and adolescents. You have some that target older women that have been in the life for a long time. There's one organization that really doesn't target anything to do with anti-human trafficking. They just go to juvenile detention centers and educate young girls. So maybe that girl was picked up for shoplifting or drugs. or something like that. And I just go there and educate them because guess what? They're at risk. So, I mean, I think some of these things are brilliant. Some of them target educating teachers, flight attendants. So that's what I love about, many of these organizations. So whatever your passion is that you can get involved in, they're doing all different things but have a very common goal. This is an example of Backpage. I didn't actually pull this up. I made one of the students do it because I didn't want to get in trouble because I thought, oh my God, Big Brother's watching. Make one of the students get in trouble. No. But it's actually shut down now. These are real pictures from the Houston area, commercial front brothels in Houston. There's Elijah Rising is an organization that I partner with, and that one of our a group of our students last year felt very passionate about this cause, and they formed a student organization here on campus, university-wide, called SWAT, Students Working Against Trafficking. So if you want to join or you have more interest, you can certainly email me. The Elijah Rising is a place that we go to very frequently. They offer tours, and they have kind of a disturbing thought, but they have a museum of what they call a museum of modern slavery. So one of their times that they kind of barged in and shut down one of these brothels, they gutted it and turned it into their basically home office. So they kept some of the areas intact, so to speak, and replicated what it actually looks like in some of these areas. So this is from a cantina. This is a massage, like a Thai massage parlor, and this is actually a residential, what you would call a residential brothel, just a room, basically. I know some of that's graphic. But here's some of the health consequences to think about. I already talked about back pain, pelvic pain, gynecological situations, PTSD, certainly a lot of different psych issues, drug dependency, alcohol dependency, and then untreated medical conditions. They may have dental problems, missing teeth, and that type of thing. So you think about the scenario. I used to think in my head that it would be, young girl, old creepy guy. That's how usually this couple scenario is going to be. And it's not that way. It's actually young girl, older woman. Older woman pretending to be a mom, pretending to be a cousin, older sister, aunt. Maybe if there's really, and they're really not going to take them to you at the clinic or any kind of health provider because they know that you guys are smart, and they're like, no, we're going to just let them get sick. Unless worst case scenario, we really need to take them in, then we'll do it. So when they do, it's usually a woman. Usually there will be like a cell phone maybe laying out. It's on, and traffickers on the other end of the phone making sure that no one's going to tell them anything or ask for help. So the trafficker's listening in the whole time. Usually the person, the victim, is not going to have any identification. Maybe things are going to be sketchy. Maybe they have a tattoo or some sort of marking on them that kind of gives some sort of identification. Sometimes it's a barcode, like indicating that they're property. I read an article one time that someone had someone's name tattooed very large across their chest backwards. And someone asked them, why is that? What does that mean? And she says, so every time I look in the mirror, I know who I belong to. So sometimes you're going to see weird kind of stuff like that, indicating that they're property or they're a victim of trafficking. It's the health consequences that we want to look out for, and always question. You do have an obligation to report if it's a child, right? But what if it's an adult? What do you think? What do you do? It's a tough one. So definitely, they're not going to want to self-identify. They're going to be afraid. They may not speak the language. What I love about WHO, or World Health Organization, puts out lots of different education materials, and I think I've counted maybe 40 different languages. So, I mean, it's great. I mean, they have downloadable materials that you can print out. And then certainly also, victims, they're going to have limited interaction. There's going to have someone speaking for them most of the time. I have some other slides here, like specific questions to ask. This is on Blackboard, so you can take a look at that. Diagnostic evaluation, I kind of explained some of those, like tattoos, and that type of thing. They may have injuries, some that maybe not are not healed, and certainly alcohol and drug potential. This is some of just resources for you. And then certainly email me, or you can email SWAT organization, student organization, where we haven't been that active this past fall semester, but we're looking to be more active this next spring. Basically, the students that co-founded the organization, they founded the organization, they were all excited about it, and then they like went off to clinical rotations. So now we're reforming with new classes, new medical students and OTs, PTs, PAs, and everybody to get involved. And so we'll be really doing some big and interesting things for the spring. Other things that we're always doing, little tiny things, like I remember a few months ago, maybe it was around Easter, we put together little Easter baskets. Well, one of the organizations contacted me and said, do you think that you can get your students or get people together to make Easter baskets for the children? And I just thought for a second, the children? It never occurred to me that there's children involved somewhere in one of these houses or brothels that they got pregnant and had, their trafficker's child or some John's child that they don't know who the father is. That never occurred to me. So we put together several little, Easter baskets for those children. And there's a whole other lecture I could give on just what happens with the children and that type of thing. But I know that this is heavy-hearted and kind of leaves you going on like, good night, everybody. It kind of leaves you to go. But it's definitely some things to think about. When Dr. Patel was talking earlier, that it's really our duty to enforce human rights, right? Just like every individual of us. We can't just leave it up to the government, leave it up to some other bigger part. It's really our responsibility as individuals. And so I don't know why this has really been, really implanted on my heart. It's just like one of those things. I'm just very passionate about it. And so hopefully you guys are too. Certainly email me. And thank you guys. Have a wonderful night. Thanks. I don't know how to do any of this. How are you?
Good. How are you? How was your Thanksgiving?
Good. How was yours?